All right, it is Wednesday, January 16th, 2013. I have on the phone with me Dick Armey, former majority leader and former chairman of FreedomWorks, who recently resigned. Mr. Armey, you've agreed to come back and redo the interview we did yesterday because of some audio problems.
Yes, I have.
All right, I'm going to do this to make it a little bit easier so we don't have to rehash the same things. Yesterday, I asked you at the beginning of the interview to tell our readers and listeners a little bit about your history. You've served 18 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. Part of that time, you were the majority leader in the U.S. House. You were originally elected in 1984. You left at the conclusion of the 2002 term. You were one of the co-chairman of Citizens for a Sound Economy in 2003, which in 2004 merged with Empower America and became, part of it anyway, became FreedomWorks. Is that correct?
Right.
All right, you've recently resigned from FreedomWorks. I had you on the phone yesterday. I asked you to do this interview, and for full disclosure purposes, I have been completely honest with you and letting you know up front that I and my organization have had some questions about FreedomWorks in the past. FreedomWorks is an organization. How did it come about? Where did it get its name?
Well, the name Freedom Works actually came in the discussions with Jack Kibbe related to the merger. We were searching out a different name. I had used the slogan Freedom Works since 1984 or 94, and it had become pretty well identified with me through a variety of uses. So we both agreed that that would be an excellent name for the new organization. I thought that was generous on everybody's part, particularly Jack Kibbe's, because that certainly would increase the extent to which Freedom Works, the new organization, would be identified with me.
Okay. What was the purpose? Let's see. Citizens for a Sound Economy was or is or was an organization that also branched off, and part of it became Americans for Prosperity, if I'm correct.
Right.
Citizens for a Sound Economy was basically an organization that was for limited government, limited taxes, and personal responsibility. Is that an accurate description?
Right. Citizens for a Sound Economy was the forerunner to Freedom Works. And actually what happened was when the Koch brothers split off, they started their own organizations, American for Prosperity, and the name Citizens for a Sound Economy just sort of disappeared. It just kind of fell into disuse.
Okay. You have been involved with FreedomWorks since its inception in 2004. I spoke with you yesterday, and in our communications through email and private messages through Facebook, I brought to your attention that many people that were involved with FreedomWorks activities in the past election year were somewhat surprised because they thought that FreedomWorks originated around the 2009 birth of the Tea Party movement. Why do you think so many people don't know the history of FreedomWorks?
Well, I don't know. Frankly, we wrote a book entitled Give Us Liberty for the purpose of trying to help answer a lot of these questions. You know, I'm sure a lot of people didn't read the books, but still, on the other hand, what happened was in 2009, the whole grassroots movement kind of sprung onto the American scene at a level and to a degree that nobody had ever seen it before. And I have no doubt that a lot of people thought that Freedom Works originated with that sort of eruption of that grassroots activity that started in that year.
Okay. In your resignation, in the last 2 months, there's been an awful lot of stuff in the media, on the internet, that has pretty much attacked and trashed your reputation. We touched on some of this yesterday, so I'm going to go over it real quick. Eric Erickson with redstate.com has accused you of talking and leaking to Mother Jones, a far-left publication, in what he has referred to as an effort basically to help Mother Jones destroy FreedomWorks. You explained to me yesterday, and when I asked you, I said, has Eric Erickson, Red State, or any of these conservative media outlets that are accusing you of trying to destroy FreedomWorks, have they ever contacted you asking you to talk to them?
No, they haven't, and it's a little bit annoying because, quite frankly, had they done so, the first item of information they could have obtained was, I never leaked anything. A lot of my private business was leaked to Mother Jones and other liberal outlets. Once your private information about your personal life is leaked to people, you have no choice but to talk to the people who have the information. So what happened was, somebody would leak something that was personal and private to me, to Mother Jones, on many, many occasions, many things. Virtually everything that was leaked to Mother Jones was detrimental to me and my reputation. And then they would call me and they'd ask me, before they went to print on it, do I want to tell my side of the story? Well, you're darn tootin' I want to tell my side of the story. Why should I let people who are trying to destroy me tell my side of the story without answering it? That's how I came to talk to Mother Jones. The difference between Mother Jones and so many of these other outlets like Red State was they had the decency and showed me the courtesy of talking to me before they went to print on a story regarding me. The fact of the matter is, I have no doubt that Mother Jones' first instinct was, boy, we got something on Army, let's burn him. But they had enough professional sense of obligation and professional ethics. They said, let's talk to him first. The fact of the matter is, after very brief conversations, they were able to see that I was the guy that was getting, my private business leaked to them for the express purpose of damaging my reputation. And they wrote honest stories. Frankly, you can whine and complain all you want about my talking to Mother Jones, but the fact of the matter is there's scarcely nobody in the conservative media that on a professional or journalistic basis have treated me with the professional courtesies that Mother Jones has treated me.
All right, I'm going to go backwards here. I've asked you some questions about incidences involving FreedomWorks while you were still chairman of FreedomWorks. I asked you if you had any knowledge of the agreement, the amounts of money that were paid to sponsor a blog bash event which was run or is ran by an individual by the name of Ali Akbar in the National Bloggers Club at CPAC last year, as well as at BlogCon, which was an event put on in Charlotte by FreedomWorks. You told me yesterday that you have no knowledge of the arrangements or the amounts of money that FreedomWorks has paid to sponsor Ali Akbar organized events. Is that correct?
That is correct. What happened about starting around the beginning of last year, or perhaps at the end of the year prior, Matt Kibbe became very secretive and very distant from me and withheld all kinds of information on a variety of subjects. And this is only some of the information that he withheld from me. So no, I did. In fact, I did not know who Ali Akbar was until I saw your request for an interview and then looked you up and read some of the stuff on your site, which informed me on Ali Akbar.
As someone who's been involved with tax-exempt charities for quite some time, do you believe that it is the responsibility of FreedomWorks to know as much information about individuals and organizations before they expend finances to support or sponsor any such individual or organization?
I certainly do, and I also think that any organization that resolves on the depends upon whether the partnership contributions of people who share a commitment to the purposes that they're committed to. They have a responsibility to not only know exactly who they're supporting, but to know to see to it that the money goes for the purposes for which the contributors felt they were going to go in the first place. And one of my problems with Freedom Works was I felt a lot of the money that was being spent at Freedom Works was being spent on purposes that were outside the scope of the requests that we had made of donors and contributors.
You are quoted somewhere as saying that one of the reasons when you resigned that you notified FreedomWorks to cease and desist using your name in any email solicitations, Facebook promotions, Twitter accounts, etc., was because you had discovered that FreedomWorks was sending out emails under your name soliciting contributions from members?
Well, yes, I mean, what had happened is they had just grown so much in the habit of using my name on any number of purposes and had fallen completely out of the pattern of clearing things with me that I began, once I became concerned about what they were doing and how they were doing and if it was legitimate or not, I discovered all kinds of uses of my name that I felt were uses I would not have approved of had I been asked for permission for this or that particular use. So the other thing is, by the time I came to the point of my resignation, I frankly did not want my name in any way in association with Matt Kibbe and those folks who were at the leadership helm at Freedom Works.
We discussed some of the arrangements that Freedom Works had been involved in and partnerships over the last election year, 2012. One of them is the partnership with Glenn Beck, The Blaze, and GBTV. And I know that you've said that you don't feel that the $1 million paid to Glenn Beck for mentioning Freedom Works on his radio program was the value for the dollar that it should have been. Do you find this arrangement between Matt Kibbe and Glenn Beck to be suspect? Do you think that someone or anyone should have notified listeners or readers that his comments in support of Freedom Works were based on the fact that he was being paid more than $1 million to make them?
Well, yes, of course, it is paid advertising is what it is. But it is presented to the listeners as if, gee, Glenn Beck, he must think the world of these guys. He's bragging on them all the time. Well, yes, he is. What the listener is not told is Glenn Beck is being paid to brag on them. I think there's a question of, what should I say, honesty with respect to that, both with respect to Freedom Works misleading the activists they're trying to recruit and influence, and with respect to Glenn Beck's relationship to his listeners. I believe he has an obligation to say, and now a word from our sponsor. If in fact he's being paid for saying nice things about somebody, he ought to step right up and fess up to that.
Another issue that has come to light, which the media and the conservative media has attacked you on recently, is a memo that was leaked that apparently Matt Kibbe, the president and CEO of Freedom Works, asked you to sign, which, according to the memo, you would basically memorialize that he had a standing agreement with you and Freedom Works about this book that he published last year. Would you give me your thoughts? What exactly transpired there? What was he asking, and why did you refuse to sign the memo?
Well, this was the first time anybody ever raised a question about the legitimacy of Matt Kibbe's book contract. And it was raised, the question was raised by Kibbe himself before anybody else.
Okay.
What happened was Matt Kibbe had written a book using extensive amounts of the resources of Freedom Works employees time, talent, and efforts to write the book. And unlike the book Give Us Liberty, where we had used the same process, and all the royalties had gone to Freedom Works, Matt Kibbe was putting, in this case, the royalties in his own pocket. We think that constituted what is called an illegal contribution to an unqualified person that puts the tax-free status of the organization in jeopardy. What bothered me was Matt Kibbe, who had made it a point to be sure that I was not informed about even the fact that he was writing the book, then came back and asked me to sign a document that attested to, memorialize a previous understanding. But he had no previous understanding with me. I don't know with whom he thinks he might have had a previous understanding, but insofar as he thought he had a previous understanding, he should have been asking them to sign it. I believed that if, in fact, it was demonstrated that he had not written that book on his own without enormous amounts of staff contribution, that Freedom Works would not stand up to an investigation. I believe that given the current administration in Washington, there would be more than a few people that would be more than happy to see an investigation of Freedom Works initiated. And in that case, we would end up with Freedom Works having put out a fraudulent proposition, and me, had I signed the letter, being implicated in the fraud and misrepresentation. I simply was not about to put myself in that position, and I thought it was dangerous for the organization for Kibbe to have done the same thing. So I refused to sign it. And again, make the point.
Okay.
It wasn't me that first raised the question of the legitimacy of Matt Kibbe's book contract. It was Matt Kibbe that raised that question. If he didn't think there was a concern, why was he looking for somebody to sign the letter?
Since all of this information has come out, Matt Kibbe appeared a week ago this past Monday on Glenn Beck TV, The Blaze, Monday afternoon, in which he gave an interview and attempted to basically describe you as some gun-wielding, older, delusional lunatic entering Freedom Works, with armed guards to escort him out. Could you give me your side of that story? What took place? Why did it take place?
Well, actually what happened, the Board of Trustees, you read our charter, read the Charter of Freedom Works, the Board of Trustees has the responsibility, ultimate responsibility, for the administration of the program. The three-member Board of Trustees, myself, Jim Burnley, former Secretary of Transportation under Ronald Reagan, Boyden Gray, former consul to the White House with George Bush, and ambassador under George W. Bush, and I felt that these things, after having the advice of the council of Freedom Works Professional Counsel, Alan Dye, we felt that these concerns were legitimate enough that we needed to take these people out of control of management and replace them while we could then get on with an investigation. It was our hope and our intention to do this quietly and not create a big press uproar just prior to the elections. That was extremely important to us to try to avoid any kind of uproar in the press that would jeopardize our chances of winning the elections. But,
did you?
Again, let me just, one of the points again.
Okay.
Dick Armey never acted unilaterally. I followed the standard practices, prudent practices of having, in this case, I happened to have a security guy with me who was well known to Freedom Works, to Matt Kibbe, and to Adam Brandon, and to many of the staff, who oftentimes accompanied me on Freedom on that meeting. He did, in fact, have a gun. His gun was holstered behind his back, under his coat, and not visible to a certain person. And why did they know that he had a gun? Because they knew who he was. But nobody was brandishing a firearm, and Bo did not, in fact, escort anybody out of the building. So they just really puffed this thing up after that horrible shooting in Connecticut. This story emerged. One of the first things I think I would have asked if I'd been with the Washington Post is, why did you not tell us this story before the shooting in Connecticut?
Give me a timeline on the agreements with Glenn Beck by Freedom Works. How much involvement Mr. Kibbe or whoever, who's responsible for entering into those agreements? Would it be Matt Kibbe? And under the charter of Freedom Works, is he obligated to make you aware of these things prior to enacting them?
Well, actually, the arrangements with Glenn Beck were made and have been made for some time. They were initiated by Matt Kibbe, and as we were wont to do so many times in our board meetings, because remember, our organization operated on trust. We trusted the people that we were working with. And we, in fact, said to Kibbe, go ahead. We didn't know that it would grow to be the amount of money and so forth. Once he got the green light to go ahead and make the initial effort, he expanded it, and it became fairly obviously, to me at least, and to some of the others, members of the staff, this was just growing into a special relationship between Matt Kibbe and Glenn Beck, and we believed, and I believe today, no doubt, we were paying out the money that resulted in more benefit to Beck than to Freedom Works. I don't think we got into business, and certainly our contributors did not get into the business of contributing for the purpose of making Glenn Beck more financially secure in his operation. That's what I think was the upshot of it.
Do you think that Freedom Works owed a responsibility to its contributors and its supporters to disclose to them that the Glenn Beck, Matt Kibbe appearances around the country in these free packs would require that Glenn Beck's requirement of being flown to and from by private jet, that expense to Freedom Works would be disclosed to its membership up front?
Well, certainly, if Freedom Works were paying for Glenn Beck's private flights, yeah, I think obviously this is something they did a couple of things that I found objectionable on behalf of our activists. One, they were actually asking activists to pay an admission fee to attend these things. I don't think activists should ever be charged to attend a rally. You should always be thrilled to death that they care enough to show up at the rally. And two, if in fact they were paid for Glenn Beck's expensive travel, yes, I do think that, I mean, first of all, I could say I wasn't aware of it if he was.
Okay.
And this is just not acceptable in my estimation.
I gave you a couple of examples yesterday, and I'm going to give them to you again. This goes back to organizations sponsoring other organizations' events. In this particular case, I'm going to use the example of Freedom Works being a listed, paid sponsor of the Blog Bash and National Bloggers Club event by Ali Akbar. Do you think, what would you call, for example, say Freedom Works had an employee who was a friend of Ali Akbar's, who went in and convinced you or Matt Kibbe to become a paid sponsor of Blog Bash. And then in return, Ali Akbar would give a 12% commission of whatever that paid sponsorship from Freedom Works totaled to the Freedom Works employee as compensation for convincing Freedom Works to sponsor it. Is that not basically a kickback?
Yes, it is, and I don't know that such a circumstance happened, but had it happened, I would consider that employee subject to dismissal, and I would consider it a serious betrayal of the organization's partnership relationship with activists all across the country, dereliction of its duty even to itself. My own view is such employee that if such a thing happened, should be dismissed immediately.
Mr. Armey, what was the working relationship for the staff of FreedomWorks like at the time that you resigned? And basically what I'm asking you is, there seems to be this war brewing between the so-called younger movement in the new conservative media and blogger sphere and the older conservative movement. It seems like the younger individuals in the movement's trying to take over. It's more a self-promotion type thing. Was there an environment at FreedomWorks that you knew of to where, say, maybe Matt Kibbe had certain employees that were loyal to him and would do anything for him and keep secrets from the chairman or the board of directors, or say other employees who tried to do their jobs and maybe were treated poorly for not being a loyalist to Kibbe?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that really stunned me when I got into the office, started working with them, the employees, finding out exactly what they do and what their relationships and assignments were to one another, in order to just sort things out, because it was my expectation that I'd be running the place for the next several months. One of the things I discovered was that staff was severely bifurcated into the new young people, all of whom were hired by Matt Kibbe. It seemed to have their sense of duty was, I'm here to promote Matt Kibbe. And anything other than promoting Matt Kibbe was frowned on. The old guard people that had been there all those years and had worked so wildly for the purpose that we thought were so precious in the organization of FreedomWorks, were pretty well ignored, left out, and in some cases mistreated, but there was a considerably high degree of disaffection and low employee morale with a lot of what I would call bullying and so forth. And I was just shocked. I have always, in every organization that I've ever been affiliated with, my own office, my leader office, we always had happy offices where people enjoyed working together. I had never seen such an unhappy office as I had seen when I went in. Those folks, the good people were leaving, the bad people. I characterize it as a peculiar case of Gresham's Law, where the bad staff are driving off the good staff.
Yesterday, I asked you point blank, based on request that I myself made to FreedomWorks for interviews with you and Matt Kibbe back in October of 2012. I asked you point blank, did you ever receive a request through the communications director, Jackie Bodner, from us requesting an in-person interview at the FreedomWorks offices in Washington, D.C. in October of last year?
Well, no, the fact of the matter is, one of the things that we discovered as we got in there and started looking into the place was that Matt Kibbe, or somebody on his behalf, had instructed Jackie Bodner months and months earlier to take any press release, interview requests or press requests that came in for me, and to redirect them to Matt Kibbe. And which I thought, to me, as far as I'm concerned, that's a case of just blatant theft. Because in our business, our press relations are critically important. I was able to discover any number of producers across the country who had a long history of calling for me, being told I wasn't available, and having the call shuttled over to Kibbe. Let me change phones real quick.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this now.
All right. So basically, you're telling me that
obviously, I did not get. I knew nothing again of this request by you until you found me. I think it was through Facebook.
Right.
And by the way, one of the things I did after at the time of my resignation was I went in and reclaimed my Facebook and my Twitter, and had to change the passwords and so forth. And one of the difficult things that I had to contend with was just the business of getting that information from the people at Freedom Works. You know, I had to say, what is my sign-on data for Facebook and Twitter? It was like pulling teeth for me to get that information.
So you're telling me that you did find and did discover for a fact that Jackie Bodner had intercepted media requests for interviews with you and had circumvented and rerouted them to Matt Kibbe.
Absolutely. It was a consistent pattern. I verified it. And again, one doesn't want to raise this kind of an issue recklessly.
Right.
I verified that with 4 producers. Not that it had happened once, but it consistently happened over an extended period of time. I have later now verified it with 5 producers and with several print media outlets. That there was a consistent pattern of frustration on their part. They're calling to try to have an interview with Dick Armey. They're told he's not available, but they could have an interview with Matt Kibbe if they like. In too many cases, in my estimation, they accepted that. Finally, we had some producers that just became furious with them and said, no, if we can't have the guy we're asking for, we don't want to talk to anybody in your shop. So it was highly destructive of our press relationship in general and my press relations in particular. I had to spend a lot of time calling producers, apologizing to them for past confusions, for not trying to stir up, again, a big press story about it. Now, in the end, what did I do? You bet. I'm not trying to let people pull this kind of stuff on me and then just let it remain silent about it when they start busting me by leaking everything they can, making up stories like the gunman story and so forth. Eventually that story got out too.
Who do you think, or do you know, better yet, do you have absolute knowledge of who leaked those documents? And if not, who do you suspect leaked those documents?
Well, no, I don't have. I mean, that's the problem with leaks. But my practice in trying to figure out who's leaking something is to find out, first of all, who had it. In no case, when a document was leaked, was there a situation where Matt Kibbe and his folks around him did not have that document? They had access to everything that got leaked. Much of what got leaked, I never had access to, never would have seen. It's a memo from Matt Kibbe where he accuses myself, Boyden Gray, and Jim Burnley of being patsies for the Republican establishment. The letter from Burnley and Boyden Gray to Kibbe. These are things I couldn't have had. I couldn't have had the board book that got leaked, which was a quite sensation. And notice, everything is leaked to Mother Jones, for the most part, Mother Jones. People are mad at me, conservative news outlets are mad at me for talking to Mother Jones. You talk to the people who have the documents that were leaked to. You want to be mad at somebody, get mad at the guys that were doing the leaking. And, as I told one group, I said to the Daily Caller, I said, why didn't you call up Kibbe and ask these guys, why were you leaking to them instead of us? And that's the question. But no, it is clear to me that the leaks have to be coming out of Freedom Works. And by and large, the leaks are detrimental to me. I think in some of the more recent leaks, somebody at Freedom Works is leaking on Kibbe for some reason. I don't know, but I can tell you right now, that's a dangerous business because Adam Brandon has been very clear to everybody. He's going to get even with everybody, and he's doing a great deal to try to do that.
Let's touch on Mr. Brandon for a second, because we discussed yesterday the allegation that FreedomWorks used contributors' funds to purchase copies of Matt Kibbe's book retail through Amazon in an effort to manipulate the bestseller list standings. You said that you knew this and that Mr. Brandon made a habit of going and bragging around the FreedomWorks office that they were doing this?
Yeah, Matt Kibbe's biggest problem is he's got Adam Brandon who can't keep his mouth shut. He's quite a bragger. He, for example, they had an arrangement where they parted ways with an employee, and that employee was assured that as far as the world would know, it would have been that she voluntarily left. Bang! All of a sudden, you got Adam Brandon walking around telling everybody what a big shot he was because he fired her. But Adam Brandon's the guy that's bragging to everybody that we're going to get even with, we get revenge on all of those collaborators that were trying to help Army keep this place running when we were out of pocket. Brandon, in this instance, the big brag was, we're going to have Matt on the bestsellers list because we are buying the books, several thousand copies of the book, retail over Amazon, so that in that case, even though we spend more of our contributors' money for the book, we get better credit towards inclusion on the bestsellers list on the New York Times.
If FreedomWorks spent contributor money to purchase Matt Kibbe's book in bulk retail from Amazon, would that not also create a situation where Matt Kibbe was making a profit for his personal wealth out of the contributed funds of a tax-exempt organization?
Oh yeah, it's clearly using the funds of our contributors in a non-productive way, excessive way, wasteful way, and the beneficiary of this being nothing other than Matt Kibbe's personal line in his pockets and padding his resume. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's just an outrageously callous use of other people's money. I mean, where's the respect in that? I don't get it, but I'm certainly not efficient and certainly not consistent with the story that we tell. I mean, we went to our contributors and said, write us a check, and I promise you we will spend it wisely by buying copies of a book written by one of our staff, retail, so that he can have an enhanced position on the bestsellers list. I believe it would have adversely affected our contribution experience to have told that story. And yet that is what was going on.
I'm going to go back to the attacks that have been lodged against you for talking with Mother Jones and Media Matters. Do you find that criticism somewhat hypocritical? If you go on FreedomWorks' website and you look at Matt Kibbe's bio, one of the first journalist comments about Matt Kibbe is written by a gentleman by the name of Dave Weigel. Mr. Weigel is a columnist for the Slate.com and a contributor to MSNBC, and he is probably one of the most liberal-leaning journalists out there, and yet he seems to have a very deep and intimate relationship with Matt Kibbe and others in the conservative new media blogosphere. Is that not somewhat contradictory?
Yeah, it's a bit of a surprise, but my guess is there's probably some kind of a financial relationship between Weigel and Kibbe. I don't know what it would be, but it's certainly out of character with these guys. Now, on the other hand, I will say this guy David Korn, and during this uproar of press bickering that I've got myself involved with, or that they've sort of dragged me into, the fairest, most honest guy that I've seen in the press, present company excluded, has been the guy from Mother Jones. So I don't know why I don't know what his relationship would be. But it's surely interesting that Kibbe is more than happy to take praise from this guy, irrespective of his left-leaning credentials, while at the same time he's encouraging people to complain about whatever press I get in these same publications.
Mr. Armey, I'm going to go back to Jackie Bodner for a minute. Yesterday, when we were discussing the allegations that she was intercepting and redirecting media requests for interviews for you, you had said that, in your opinion, that was incompetence. Would you say that her performance at that position of communications director bordered on incompetence, or was it just misplaced loyalty?
No, actually, what I said was, during a very long period of time prior to my discovering what was going on, I was aware that all of a sudden I wasn't getting anything near the kind of press requests that I had had. And it occurred to me, is it possible that somebody is redirecting my press request? I said this more likely that it's just that Jackie Bodner is incompetent. I thought, and I entertained myself with the belief for a long time, Jackie's just incompetent, and eventually at some point she will, get her act together and the press will come back on. What I later found out was it wasn't that she was only just incompetent, it was more importantly that she had been instructed. When I finally pinned her down on it, her plea was, it's not fair to fire me, I was just following orders.
So she acknowledged and admitted that she was instructed to redirect and intercept your media requests?
Right, yeah.
Did she say who instructed her to do that?
No, she didn't.
Okay.
I probably should have jumped on her. At the time, strangely enough, at that very moment, I was more feeling sorry for Jackie than I was determined to get to the bottom of who ordered it. I thought I'd have plenty of time to come back to that, but the other side of that, I knew dang good well who might have ordered it to her.
I asked you yesterday if you thought that organizations like FreedomWorks, or any organization, whether it's FreedomWorks on the right or whether it's Media Matters on the left, when they get involved in such defined relationships with media personalities such as Glenn Beck or the Chris Matthews or the Keith Olbermanns or the Rush Limbaughs of the world, if that might not actually hurt an organization's purpose and ability to get results. What do you think?
Well, my own view is every time you have earned media, and then you basically, you are a story because you're doing something worthwhile. That's a good thing. If in fact you get involved in a paid media situation, then in fact what you are a story because you got the money to pay somebody to put you on the deal. But what happens is you begin then to lose sight of what your mission is. I had said in my own book, Army's Axioms, years ago, one of my axioms was, if it's about you, you lose. And what I saw happening was a lot of these, what I think happened with FreedomWorks. They became so enamored of their relationship with Glenn Beck that they were willing to divert their attention away from those things that we had traditionally done and that had set us apart as uniquely productive in the doing of things that are important and worth doing. And we had said, well, we'll do these things instead. One of the criticisms that I heard about our older folks, the ones that have been around doing these things, and it brought us to the point of recognition and distinction for the good results we were getting, such as we did in the 2010 elections. One of the consistent complaints about these folks was, well, they don't get it. They don't get the new way of doing things around here. Well, maybe they didn't, because they were still committed to the old ways of doing things.
Well, let's talk about the new way of doing things. With the new media, bloggers, and the blogosphere, it seems that FreedomWorks did something that the left has been quite successful in doing, and that is picking out a few chosen conservative bloggers and basically established a favored blogger relationship. It's like FreedomWorks will only talk to certain people. And we got back to where you said earned press as opposed to paid media. Do you think that maybe FreedomWorks, and any organization for that matter, should concentrate more on the earned media and stop getting involved in these favored blogger type relationships that might come back to bite somebody at the end?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind about that. And it's a lazy way. In other words, say, all right, I will get my media because I will have my special relationship with these select people. First, it's a lazy way of proceeding. And the fact of the matter is, you should have media recognition if, in fact, you do things of distinction and accomplishment, not because you've got cultivated some peculiar relationship. Oftentimes, cultivation of these relationships involves the exchange of currency. And I just think it gets into what should I say, risky business, but it's also it's an undignified business. You know.
Let me ask you this. You're aware of the questions that I have posed to FreedomWorks now for approximately 1 year regarding its paid sponsorship of Blog Bash. If you were still the chairman of FreedomWorks and this came to your attention, would you believe that this was something that needed to be answered, that FreedomWorks owed its membership, its contributors, and its own status as far as being an organization with integrity to actually answer the questions as far as how they got involved with Blog Bash, how much money they expended, and how much they knew at the time?
Actually, as a matter of fact, one of the things that I intended to do with FreedomWorks is have a full review of everything, every contractual relationship they had, with my expectation being that, and my point was, we would of course fulfill any contractual obligations we had, but all of these contracts would be reviewed. My own expectation was that upon review, many of these contracts, particularly the ones that I was aware of, with Glenn Beck and these guys, Rush Limbaugh, that these things would probably be scaled back in the future because I considered them. I was just, and today, certain they're not a good, sound, productive use of your money and your resources, and there's something that is, I think, essentially dishonest about it. So, but all of that was going to be reviewed if I had to take over and run the organization. And I have an idea that the understanding that Armey's going to review these contracts and probably in the future not be willing to renew them has an awful lot to do with the reason why so many people were so willing to quickly rush to to the Kibbe camp of, all right, let's defame this guy and run him out of town because, he's gone to meddling now. He's getting involved in our life school.
I asked you yesterday, I read you the portions from Eric Erickson's RedState.com column from December 27th, where he accused you of giving up the fight, cutting a deal, and running away with a pocket full of money. You explained to me, and I'm going to ask you to explain it again, you did not negotiate a deal to leave Freedom Works with a big payday. If I understood you correctly yesterday, you were actually in the process of negotiating a way to stay. Would you explain to me what transpired, what this arrangement was, who it was with, and why Eric Erickson and others are mistaken and out of line for accusing you of taking the money and running?
My first reaction to all of the discovery that just came rushing in on me was, I sue these guys for tortious interference, take my money and leave. Because there was no way I was ever going to work with these people again. Then I realized that, well, in order to do that, I would have two things. I would have to sue the organization, and I'd have to have an uproar before the elections. I thought, my wife and I decided to go in there and try to work with this thing prior to the elections, and then move on, and then move on after we straightened it out afterward. What happened was, the first thing we discovered was we had this bifurcated staff, and we had such a hostile group of young staff because we became aware that we would never get this thing straightened out unless we fired all of them. Check your phones. So then we...
Uh-oh. Hello? All right, we have temporarily lost. Mr. Armey, but we are getting him back on the line. Okay, you accidentally hung up, but that's all right.
Okay, all right. Okay, so where was I at?
You were talking about that you realized that the only way you would be able to get things under control was if you actually just fired everyone.
Right. Yeah, it was pretty clear to me that I was going to have a massive set of firings because these guys were bound and determined to sabotage us. We were beginning to find out that they were secretly recording conversations, taking them back to Kibbe and Matt, and then mining through the conversations and preparing their stories of distress and outrageous behavior on my part and all that. So it was just going to be one just legacy of sabotage. So at that point, I just said, let's just get out of here. And then Dick Stevenson offered me a long-term consulting agreement. He was concerned. He didn't want this thing to blow up in our face. I didn't either before the elections. So I made an agreement with Dick Stevenson. I made no agreement with Freedom Works. The long-term consulting arrangement I had with Stevenson is a private contract between he and I. Would have been private if it hadn't been leaked by people for the purpose of discrediting me, and should have been private. Dick Stevenson should certainly had. There was no reason to leak his private business all over the place. But we decided we'll take this deal to reinstate these guys. We'll come back after the elections and renew the inquiry. There is an inquiry going on to this day, at this time, by the Board of Trustees, the same people who initiated the action before. And you see now the effort on the part of Kibbe to leak memorandum in which he's trying to discredit the current trustees, just as he tried to discredit me. But that was not, I mean, I think there are some people who think Armey's taking a bunch of money out of Freedom Works. I take no dime from Freedom Works.
Okay.
There is no contractual, I would not have accepted a contractual relationship that kept me involved with Freedom Works. I've already made it clear that I did not want to have any continued association with these guys.
Okay. Yesterday when I asked you, because you made it clear that your intent originally was to resign and you and your wife go about living your life, and you told me that the reason that you have responded to the allegations that have been made was, one, because you were contacted by Mother Jones, who told you point blank that they had these documents in their possession, and you did not want your grandkids and your great-grandkids of Googling your name 20 years from now and having your reputation smeared by what individuals and organizations put out on the internet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, we already have, I mean, all of us today live with that to some degree. But I had one of my grandkids ask me, she said, who is O.J. Simpson? I said, why are you asking about O.J. Simpson? She said, well, Grandpa, I was looking up your name on the internet, and they said you're just like O.J. Simpson.
Oh, my God.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, I don't want my kids seeing stuff like that. If I've done something, I got a rap coming to me for something I didn't rap me. I mean, I'll take it like a man. But I'm not going to have my children's understanding of who their grandfather is defined by a bunch of people that have just purposely put out lies about me in callous disregard of the truth for no purpose other than to discredit me and to divert attention away from their own transgressions.
Mr. Armey.
So that's why I begin to answer it. Now, again, let me remind you.
Okay.
I talked to Mother Jones because Adam, Brandon, Matt Kibbe, or whomever on their behalf leaked documents to Mother Jones. If you're mad about people talking to Mother Jones, go look up the guys that are doing the leaking and tell them, quit leaking to Mother Jones.
You have been involved, like I said, with Freedom Works since its inception. You have a storied history when it comes to the contract with America. You are one of the primary, if not the primary, authors of the Homeland Security, the forming of the Homeland Security Office. You're also considered to be somewhat more libertarian viewed as far as limited government and personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the current operations of Freedom Works is appealing to that libertarian-minded small government, personal responsibility segment of the population, or do you think that it's actually pushing them away?
I don't know. My guess would be that philosophically, I'm not sure that I would have much of a question about the difference with Matt Kibbe philosophically, but what it amounts to is how do you go about your business? Are you going to be straightforward and honest? Are you going to stay focused on the tools? Freedom Works has served the cause of small government, fiscal responsibility well, because it has been the legitimate grassroots organization in this country. It is now getting away from that. It now measures its success not in terms of how many legislative fights we might win or how many, what influence do we have over the behavior of people in office, but on how many friends they have on Facebook. I think they've completely lost track of their mission, and that will be offensive to the grassroots activist community. I think it already is. I see all kinds of traffic on the internet expressing disappointment about Freedom Works. Where are they? Why aren't they pulling their share of the vote? This is unheard of. Nobody ever worried about Freedom Works pulling their share of the vote before. All of a sudden, everybody's now concerned about it. So it isn't so much what you believe in. Now, I do think that they have a tendency to be so hidebound that they make themselves ineffective. I think the small government conservatives completely cut themselves out of the budgetary process with their abusive treatment of John Boehner. Was John Boehner 100% no? But I would rather have had the configuration that John Boehner got snubbed on with his Plan B than the configuration that we're now living with. And I think strategically, sometimes you got to figure out how much can we get. Let's get what we can, and live to fight another day. These guys are not always willing to do that, and I think that is encouraged by Freedom Works as we know it today, and I think it results in these folks being less healthy and effective than they otherwise could be.
It has been reported in some of the recent media coverage on the internet that you and Matt Kibbe had a parting of the ways primarily over Todd Aiken's run for the Senate in U.S. In the state of Missouri. There has been some reports that you wanted to continue to support Todd Aiken and Kibbe wanted to cut and run. What's your explanation on that?
My explanation was that at the time that we were discovering all of this uproar in Freedom Works and how much the resources had been diverted away from the races, that I went in and I talked to our staff about maybe a dozen races. Some in Missouri was one of them, where we could, if we put our efforts to it, we could probably pull a race out. I thought that everybody was understanding that our fear was that Obama should be reelected. And if we were going to prevent him from being reelected, we had to work wherever we had a chance of winning an election. I talked about Missouri. I talked about a lot of other races. And they isolated the Missouri thing because, again, they think they can bring some embarrassment. I talked about Virginia, I talked about Florida, I talked about Nebraska, I talked about Wisconsin, North Dakota, Michigan, or some hope there. We went deep up our efforts in Indiana, and so the only thing that we did that we can argue that we made any kind of a contribution to a positive election outcome in that whole election cycle was here in Texas, and the people that were responsible for that contribution have left Freedom Works in disgust.
You mentioned
this Todd Aiken thing is another one of the goofy smoke screens. Quite frankly, I hadn't heard it until you raised it with me, but it's just, again, part of the nonsense to keep people from asking the question, Matt Kibbe, did you honestly write that book or did you not?
Well, let me ask you that because we were going to get back to that, but did Matt Kibbe, in your opinion, honestly write his book of his own time, of his own resources, in a manner in which he should be entitled to full 100% royalty and credit for it? Or, in the alternative, do you think that Freedom Works should own the property rights to that book?
I think that book should be the property of Freedom Works. We wrote a book together, and I let him be my co-author. A couple of years earlier, we understood absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, at the beginning of that whole project, that book had to be the property of Freedom Works, and all royalties had to go to Freedom Works, or you would be at risk. You would put your 501c3 status at risk. I've talked to enough members of the staff who did enough work on that book to tell you that I do not believe that if the appropriate agency of the government would investigate the writing of that book, that they would conclude that he had a book that was free from that conflict of interest that is not concerned to me. Now, Matt Kibbe, I'm told, is now telling people he will give $50,000 Freedom Works. And apparently he thinks that should resolve that book issue. In my estimation, it doesn't. It doesn't change the fact that he purposely tried, was willing to purposely mislead the entire board of directors of Freedom Works for no purpose other than to line his own pockets. And if you take a bank robber, if he gets caught and says, well, I'll give you the money back, then they're going to let me off the hook, right? It doesn't work that way.
Do you also think that maybe Matt Kibbe should be responsible for refunding any funds from Freedom Works that were expended to purchase that book from Amazon?
Well, yeah, I personally think so. I mean, I just don't. He tells his story in grandiose terms about how this book is such a great fundraising tool and recruiting tool for the organization. My line is, I used to do the same thing when I was in Congress with peddling coffee cups. Any number of ways that you can give people some token of appreciation for their contribution. Most people are making a contribution because they care and find the token of appreciation, somewhat interesting but not precious. The fact of the matter is, I think he blatantly wasted the contributors' money on those book purchases. Yes, and he should pay them back.
Mr. Armey, I don't want to hold you up too much longer because you've done me a big favor by allowing me to redo this because of the audio problems from yesterday. But I do want to ask you two more questions before I let you go.
Okay.
You continue to refer to the grassroots efforts of Freedom Works and its contributors. Would you say that Freedom Works is funded primarily by the average American conservative who has issues with government being too big, or would you say that the majority of its funding comes from well-heeled special interest?
Well, I believe that it has gone through something of a transformation where it's become more and more dependent upon the extremely wealthy high-dollar contributors. We had been moving away from that in a different direction. I thought that was a healthier move, but I believe they've moved back in that direction again. So at this point, I think Freedom Works is primarily funded by high-dollar contributors.
Okay. What do you think is going to come out of this? What do you want the conservative media and the Eric Ericksons of the world, or the Jedediah Bilas? I mean, some of the most popular young conservative names in media and blogospheres, they've come out and they've attacked you and they've referred to you, in terms that are definitely not flattering, and yet none of them have bothered to contact you. What would you tell them to do, or that you would like to see them do, before they continue to publish any further attacks against you?
Well, I'm not sure. This is probably the last interview I'm going to be giving on this whole subject, unless I have more jump leaked out there on me. But I would say, once you have a minimal standard of decency, and before you start, pouring water down somebody's neck, screaming and hollering outrageous and non-demonstrable things about people, why don't you take the trouble, as, for example, Mother Jones did, to just call them up and say, look, I've got these papers, I've got this information, people are telling me these things about you. Do you have a side of the story you'd like to share with me? I think they call that, in other circles, courtesy, respect, decency, professional standards. Obviously, the blogging community has been criticized by the press at large for not having these standards, or feeling like they should be held to journalistic standards of integrity. All they've done is reinforce the arguments of their critics in the conventional journalistic circles, that these guys don't act very professional. I'll be the first guy to say it. Washington Post, who never came to me and said, look, you're being accused of coming in there waving guns at people, or whether it be the blogs, is simply just not professionally very high standard. So I'd say, why don't you beef up your standards, and maybe you'll get your story a little bit more accurate along the way.
Mr. Armey, one last question. I asked you yesterday, do you feel that Glenn Beck, The Blaze, Matt Kibbe, or GBTV owes you an apology?
Yeah, I suppose they do. I don't expect it, and I don't frankly want it. In order to have an apology from them, I'd have to talk to them. And quite frankly, at this point, I don't know that I want even. I don't know that I'd want to talk to them, and even for that purpose. I mean, the guys, as far as I'm concerned, they've done more harm to themselves than they have me. By the way, I'll stand on that belief, because quite frankly, they just shown themselves to be vicious people who will stoop to vicious things in order to cover their tracks. So, frankly, I don't have enough use for them right now to even think that I would gain any satisfaction out of their apologizing to me. I just think they're just a bunch of guys that are so enamored of feathering their own nest that they've, what is it, the song says they've done a load of compromising on the road to their horizon. They got their problems, I got mine, but at least my problems, I don't have to sit down and deal with my conscience about why the devil I put making a few illegitimate bucks ahead of my own standards of performance and integrity.
Mr. Armey, I want to thank you, and I want to wish your Dallas Stars all the success in bringing the Stanley Cup back to Texas where it belongs.
Now, see, you've got your priorities in much better shape already. This has obviously been good for you.
Mr. Armey, thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope this works out for you.
Thank you so very much. You have a good day, sir.
You too.
Bye-bye.